The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
Okay, let's go.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Ray Dustar, and we are back on the Deep Shallow Dive. Okay, yeah, I know. Yesterday, I got a little carried away with my Vivek versus RFK Jr. debate idea. But you know what? I had a bunch of people, and honestly, probably almost 100 people through the collective resources of social media, as well as just through this podcast and text messaging and all that stuff. But I had about 100 people get back to me, and there were only a couple that did not like the idea. So, you know what? We are onto something with that, and I'm going to continue to move that project forward and see if we can make that happen. Anyway, today I actually wanted to really delve into something that came off the heels of episode 16, which was the remembrance of September 12th. And if you go back and listen to that episode, or if you did listen to that episode, you'll remember that I didn't really post about September 11th on September 11th. Instead, I posted it on September 12th because honestly, I really do. I don't think one day a year is enough to think about that tragedy and think about all the people that died because of September 11th. The 2,996 Americans that died on 9/11, and then the 1.4 million people in Iraq and Afghanistan that lost their lives over the subsequent 20 years of that invasion of both of those countries. That's pretty insane. And so one day a year is not enough to think about that. And that's why I did that episode on September 12th. You know, I had a very, very interesting conversation with a very good friend of mine, Mike. And, you know, he really said, gosh, do you really think there was more to September 11th than what we've been told? And yeah, I do. I mean, I really do. You know, to me, September 11th and then the JFK assassination, those were two huge events where there's just a lot of controversy around them, and there's just a lot of things that really do not add up, and they never have. But for whatever reason, we've just turned a blind eye, or whatever that expression is, blind cheek, blind eye. What is that expression? Yeah, I think it's turned a blind eye. But we've turned a blind eye to it. And, you know, when Mike and I were having a conversation, we started talking about many things. And I said, listen, man, if you really want to, you know, be open to exploring, I guess, different takes on things, we've got to start with the JFK assassination, because that one, to me, that's where I started. That really was where I started, because that one, to me, you know, that is the assassination of a sitting president of the United States in broad daylight that to this day remains completely shrouded in controversy. You know, obviously RFK Jr., his nephew, now that he's running, hopefully be on the debate against Vivek, moderated by Ray D. You know, he's talked about this a lot on all the different podcasts that he's gone on. And then there was another guy, I'm going to talk about this at the end of the podcast, but a Secret Service guy who he's writing a book. So, you know, I kind of discredit that when people all of a sudden, you know, 50 years later, they decide to write a book and then give big revelations. So I sort of, I don't know, not a big fan of that strategy or that methodology. But he did come out and say that, you know, the single bullet theory, which was really the basis for the entire assassination by Lee Harvey Oswald, that was their entire theory, was based on the single bullet theory, or the magic bullet theory as they called it. But this guy this past week basically came out and just completely shattered that theory. And that was the whole basis of why they said that it was Oswald acting alone. The whole Warren Commission and everything came out. That's it. They were all in on the single bullet / magic bullet theory that it was a lone shooter, Lee Harvey Oswald. And there's just no way. So, anyway, the conversation with Mike led me to basically decide to really lay this out because I think this is ridiculously interesting. I really do. The entire JFK assassination is incredibly interesting. I think it's very timely now that his nephew is running. And so, let's get into it. Let's do it. This was something I was going to do in a few months because this one probably will be the longest to date besides my, I guess, oh God, I got to say it, my maiden voyage podcast. But let's do it. So, anyway, what I'm going to do is I've put together a barrage of clips that kind of will flow and tell the story through multiple people. RFK Jr. is quoted in this. Joe Rogan's going to be in part of it. There's actual footage of an audio from the trial. Lee Harvey Oswald, there's going to be audio from him. So let's listen to the first set of clips and then I will chime back in and give you my thoughts on that. All right. Give this a listen.
Apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
John F. Kennedy's assassination continues to be shrouded in secrecy and unanswered questions.
My uncle, John Kennedy, he realized early on that the purpose of the CIA and the intelligence apparatus was to create a constant pipeline of new wars. Eisenhower, who was the outgoing president, gave what is probably the most important speech in American history.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
Which was, where he warned against the military-industrial complex.
There are many conspiracy theories about the assassination of 35th President John F. Kennedy, but one of those isn't about his missing brain. It's undisputed that Kennedy was buried without his brain.
One reason why we may never know what really happened is that sometime after JFK's autopsy, his brain went missing, and nobody has any answers as to where it may have gone or why.
And the CIA has made next to no effort to locate it. In fact, the House Select Committee on Assassinations blamed JFK's brother, Robert, for stealing the brain and destroying it in an effort to hide JFK's deeper underlying medical issues. Likely story, but I'm not buying it.
An analysis of the brain would have shown signs of a second or alternate shooter, confirming conspiracy theories that JFK's murder wasn't the act of a lone gunman, but part of an orchestrated plan.
What do you think happened with Kennedy?
He was taken out for a number of reasons. One of them was that he wasn't keen on going into the full-blown Vietnam War.
Wow. Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. Okay, let me start off. So the Eisenhower speech where he talked about the military-industrial complex, that is something that really is one of the most important speeches of all time in America. And I'm going to do a whole nother one on the military-industrial complex, but the biggest takeaway from that is he said there's going to be a constant pipeline of wars. So think about that, a constant pipeline of wars. And I can tell you, we can relate this back to September 11th, but the events of September 11th, whatever you want to believe, it led to a 20-year war in Afghanistan. And then that war, which ended this past year, or actually last year, sorry, when Biden withdrew, what happened after that? I think within months, we ended up going into Ukraine. So again, constant pipeline of war. Okay, the second part of that I want to unpack, because I think it's fascinating actually, is his missing brain. Like, what? His missing brain? Like, somebody stole his brain? And there's no way Robert Kennedy, his brother, stole his brain. That's ridiculous. I actually even asked our buddy ChatGPT, and even ChatGPT said that yes, Kennedy was buried without his brain. And so if you really think about that, come on, let's call a spade a spade. That brain was taken because upon examination, I'm sure they could tell that there was a second shooter. I'm sure that they could tell that the bullets came in from different angles, and there's no way it could only be a lone shooter. Okay, and then the last thing, which was the most important, and honestly, the reason why I think he was assassinated is because he was going to remove us from Vietnam. Again, Vietnam, constant pipeline of war. That was practically the birth of the military industrial complex. And he wasn't playing ball with that. I think it must have got to a point where, whoever, quote unquote, felt this was the only option. And what proves that is a week, maybe even less. Actually, maybe even less. But Lyndon B. Johnson, when he was sworn in as president, his first act in office was basically to double down on the Vietnam War. So think about it. Kennedy said, I'm going to withdraw. Within a month, he's dead. Lyndon B. Johnson comes in, says, hey, we're going to double down our efforts. We're going back in full throttle. Seriously. I mean, I'm no Sherlock Holmes, but I think I pieced that together pretty nicely. All right, I'm fired up again. All right, so now here's the second series of clips, and you've really got to pay attention here. So this is going to be a combination of actual footage, audio. I'm going to do a video of this as well, but currently audio from the trial. You're going to hear from Lee Harvey Oswald, and then Oliver Stone's movie JFK. I mean, that thing was phenomenal. And if you read all the reviews and all the analysis, they really said it was dead on and absolutely accurate. So there's going to be some audio from Oliver Stone's JFK movie. So that's going to be Kevin Costner that you hear. But again, I vetted all that against all the other information that's out there, and it was dead on. It was absolutely dead on. And then the quality of the audio, obviously being that I pulled it off a film, is much, much better. Okay, so give this a listen and then we will talk about it.
Stop scrolling if you think JFK's assassination was suspicious.
The JFK assassination. My belief, I think that Lee Harvey Oswald was in on it.
Do you think there are multiple shooters?
Yes. And one of the reasons why I believe that is because of the formation of the single bullet theory.
They'd already made the commitment to themselves that it was a sole assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald.
Did you kill the president?
No, I've not been charged with that. In fact, nobody has said that to me yet.
They then had to find a way to fit all that in. The way they found was the so-called single bullet theory, which we prefer to refer to as the magic bullet theory.
A single bullet now has to account for the remaining 7 wounds in Kennedy and Conley. One of the grossest lies ever forced on the American people. We've come to know it as the magic bullet theory. The magic bullet enters the president's back, headed downward at an angle of 17 degrees. It then moves upwards in order to leave Kennedy's body from the front of his neck. Wound number 2, where it waits 1.6 seconds, presumably in midair, where it turns right, then left, right, then left, and continues into Conley's body at the rear of his right armpit. Wound number 3. The bullet then heads downward at an angle of 27 degrees, shattering Conley's 5th rib and exiting from the right side of his chest. Wound number 4. The bullet then turns right and re-enters Conley's body at his right wrist. Wound number 5. Shattering the radius bone, the bullet then exits Conley's wrist. Wound number 6. Makes a dramatic U-turn and buries itself into Conley's left thigh. Wound number 7, from which it later falls out and is found in almost pristine condition on a stretcher in a corridor of Parkland Hospital. That's some bullet.
That is the theory that holds that the same bullet that went through the president's back and out his neck re-entered Conley's back, went through his chest, broke his rib, exited from the front of his chest, re-entered the back of his wrist, caused a comminuted or shattered fraction of the distal end of the radius, the heavy bent dense bone that comes from the elbow to the wrist, exited from the front of the wrist, re-entered the left thigh, fell out of the left thigh, was not noticed by anybody until a few hours afterwards at Parkland Hospital when a maintenance man was trying to get to the men's room, found his way blocked by stretchers from the emergency room, moved the stretcher, and lo and behold, there was Commission Exhibit 399, the magic bullet.
This single bullet explanation is the foundation of the Warren Commission's claim of a lone assassin.
Bullets do not react that way, not even in comic books.
They killed him.
They killed him.
They fucking
Let's
killed
just get it out of the way. They killed him.
All right. Wow. Okay. Hey, sorry about the F-bomb there at the end. That was Joe Rogan. I tried to mute it out, but then it just wasn't working. Anyway, okay, that was pretty amazing. That really was. And at the end of the day, you know, their entire case surrounded the magic bullet. Remember, their assertion was that it was Lee Harvey Oswald acting alone, and there's just no way that one bullet caused 7 wounds, tore through skin, bone, flesh. At one point, it made a U-turn. It felt like a cartoon, like Roadrunner or something. It like stopped in midair and made a U-turn. And then, like hours later, it's found on a stretcher at the hospital in pristine condition, they said. Like literally, it looked like it had just been taken out of the box. I mean, come on, bro. That's just insane. That is just insane. Anyway, all right. Wow, this was a deep, shallow dive. Like this was literally the definition of a deep, shallow dive. And I don't know, do your own research if you want. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. This episode took me like 6 hours. This took a long time to put all this together. And we're going to net out at about 17 minutes, something like that. But there was a ton of research that went into this. I highly recommend, if you need a movie to watch at some point, go back and rewatch Oliver Stone's JFK. It's absolutely fantastic, especially now if you watch it through, you know, the lens of this episode and just the lens of everything, the lens of 2024. But at the end of the day, you know, someone asked me, do you think Lee Harvey Oswald was even part of it? Yeah, I do. I mean, I actually do. He probably was involved in this in some way, but not in the way that he was convicted of and not in the way that he was portrayed. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this because honestly, I enjoyed doing it, even though it was a lot of work. And say it with me, everybody. Let's call a spade a spade. All right, everybody. Talk to you soon.
This episode was brought to you by Boost Liquid Vitamins. Wake up, take your Boost, start your day. Drink your vitamins, build your immune system with Boost. Available on Boost.com.